Welcome back to Rockstock Channel. It is Thursday, December 12th, and today we have back on the channel Steve LeVine for the first time in 3 years. Steve is an author, has written books, and is also a world-class journalist, currently writing for The Electric, which is part of a company called The Information. We interviewed him, like I said, in 2021, around the time where there were major IPOs and SPACs in the battery supply chain. Steve was making a big call that LFP was going to be a very important and dominant chemistry, in the world and in the U.S. He was right about that. We also discussed at the time, the upstream and midstream and the sourcing strategies of the big three autos. And recently, you may have seen in July, Steve and I, together with 3 or 4 others, were at Fast Markets on a panel talking about the U.S. election. I was taking a bit of an optimistic view if Trump were to win. Steve was a bit more bearish, kind of on the EV tax credit. But he's written a number of articles since Trump's election. And one in particular caught my eye because it's very much in line with my thinking. And that is a lot of the negotiation and tariffs and what we're seeing out of Trump is setting the stage potentially for a grand bargain whereby Trump may allow, the CATLs, the BYDs, and other upstream EV supply chain companies to come to the United States. So we're going to lead with that, but a couple of other articles he's written. His most recent article is about the AI mania, providing a demand for next-gen EV battery makers. And he also talked about, U.S. and auto battery makers, poised to fight, Trump's anti-EV plans. He wrote about Northvolt's bankruptcy, and, will Tesla genuinely stand to benefit under the Trump administration. So for reference, the article we're going to start with here, this grand bargain, if you'd like a copy of that, please email me or us at rockstockchannel@rkequity.com. But, Steve, why don't you tell people first, about yourself a little bit and about your electric subscription, because we think it could be valuable for all viewers to subscribe to that directly.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. And it's been too long. Thanks for inviting me back. So I've been writing The Electric for 3 years now. I come at batteries from a roundabout direction. I was a foreign correspondent for 18 years. I was based in the Philippines and then Pakistan and then the former Soviet Union. I did oil. My first book was on oil, the battle between Russia and the U.S. To control the oil on the Caspian Sea. And then I came to from that kind of geopolitical mindset around energy. I gravitated to batteries because of the brewing competition between China and the U.S. who was going to control batteries and EVs around. This started 2009, 2010, and I wrote The Powerhouse in that time period. That the book that came out in 2015. The Electric, you can subscribe. You get the information with it. A lot of reporting around the AI revolution, and just go online, The Electric and Steve LeVine, and everything is there with your credit card. Subscribe many times.
And the subscription costs like $2,000 a year. Is that right?
No. It's that's like with all startups. We started, and then once we broadened out, it's $400 a year, which is a big bargain. It's a bargain.
That is a bargain. I thought it was $2,000 a year. So look at that, 80% reduction, just like it's going down in line with the lithium price.
That's right.
Okay, great. So Well, it's great to have you back. You are based in Washington, D.C. We're thinking of calling a series here Washington ACDC because so much about the EV battery, upstream, midstream supply chain is still very much policy driven, government policy driven, and subsidies in China, subsidies in Europe. We have, Biden and the Inflation Reduction Act. There was, the very significant changes under Biden that spurred growth in this sector. But now there's a fair bit of uncertainty. And as I mentioned on the debate stage in July, when it looked like Trump might win, you were pretty bearish. So just has your thinking evolved since you've seen him lay out his cabinet, and this relationship with Elon Musk and some of the other advisors from Silicon Valley and the like, and what led you and a colleague of yours at the Wall Street Journal to write this thought piece about the grand bargain?
Yeah. No, my thinking has not changed, and what that was that I thought that Trump was being very very candid and straightforward about his sensibility around EVs, around energy, and didn't have much sympathy really for EVs and for the industrial policy that Biden had brought in. That's the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law, and so I had predicted at that time, in our conversation on stage, that the people in the industry needed to get ready for to lose a bunch of the subsidies, and I focused on two of the subsidies that were likely to go, and one of them was the grants. There were $6.5 billion of grants from out of the infrastructure law given out by the Department of Energy to battery and mining companies, and these are meant to establish a supply chain to compete with China's. And the other subsidy that I forecast was vulnerable was the Loan Programs Office. This is the largest single piece of money that the Department of Energy has, $400 billion, and these are low cost loans. They're very very high. For example, Ford got one for $9 billion, very low interest rates, and again meant to build up that supply chain. And those, in fact, are, as he won, and it's coming closer to him taking power. More people do feel that those are vulnerable, and I did not mention, but also vulnerable, the $7,500 consumer tax credit on each vehicle that could go. So that's that, and I felt that, and I think that it's no longer the case, but the industry was super Pollyannish and naive, I think, about, and there's still this, Trump doesn't mean it when he talks this way. He's just he's just blathering. Well, I guess sometimes, but I think a lot of times, usually, he is saying what he really thinks, and his campaign, his transition office. When you ask now, does the president-elect intend to do X, Y, Z? They respond. Trump won a resounding victory. He told the electorate what he intended to do, and he's going to do it. So that leads into the grand bargain. the other thing that we talked about on that stage, Howard, was the American EV industry and battery industries need Chinese expertise. We don't have it. We don't have the know-how how to make batteries, and and we also don't have the supply chain. And so if Ford, GM, Stellantis, and so on, and also Tesla and Rivian and Lucid, the startups, if they want to make EVs, and especially if they want to make them at scale, they need Chinese lithium. They need nickel. They need all of the precursors, cathodes and anodes and separators, all of that, and the batteries, and we need to learn how to make. Americans need to learn how to make those things. We need to get humble and realize we don't know how to do it, and bring in the experts and learn how to do it. Create a workforce, and so we see that Trump has appointed a team of China hawks. He talks like a China hawk, and his from the Secretary Marco Rubio across national security advisors, his trade officials, his people in the DOE, and so on. They're pro fossil fuel, and they're tough on China. And he's talking tough on China. Right? He's already talking, tariffs, high tariffs. But he also Trump is a deal maker. He also wants to be seen as a great leader. He's forever comparing himself with the greatest leaders in the U.S. in history, and the world. And I really think that at the end, that's how he wants to be seen. A grand bargain with China. There's nothing greater that he could do in his time in office than be the one who did a grand bargain with China, bring down the temperature, and get some kind of a working relationship. And I think after all the tough talking and the threats from both sides, that Trump is going to want to sit down and horse trade and come up with a big deal that he'll boast about. And part of that deal will involve bringing Chinese EV and battery companies to manufacture in the United States.
So I want to dig a bit deeper into that, because you said on the one hand he has a whole bunch of hawks, and he has a whole bunch of talks, talking tough, and people say when I look at his last administration, most politicians just say something and then they come in power and they don't do anything. But under the Trump administration, he tried very hard to do everything that he promised when he was campaigning. So I agree with you that you should take him at his word that he's going to try to do things that he promised to do. On the other hand, there's a saying in Washington, take everything that he said, seriously, but not literally. Right. Okay. So he has been saying, he wants to get rid of the EV mandate. Right. There's not specifically exactly what is that EV mandate. We're not sure. And you referenced in this Grand Bargain article that at the Republican National Convention and a few other times, he said, if CATL and BYD, we're not going to welcome exports from Mexico, but if they want to build here, he'll let them build here, right? And CATL, right after the election, said, we're open to doing that. So let's talk about that a bit. But you also said you referenced a number of the China hawks here. So I've really been analyzing very carefully all of the people that he's announcing in his administration. So you're absolutely right that Marco Rubio at Department of State has been very anti-China. He has written documents responding to the Made in China 2025. Like, how do we, so I've read those very carefully. He's very well aware, of that. And the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, who he just appointed, also a China hawk, and Peter Navarro, senior advisor for trade and manufacturing, also a hawk from the prior administration. On the other hand, he did appoint this guy Perdue as the China ambassador, and I forget his first name, but David Perdue. So David Perdue, spent most of his career showing Americans how do they outsource to China, for like the past 30 years. So, but he's very close and friendly and knows China, and it seems to be a bit of an, potential more dovish with him. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, as far as I'm reading, is a bit maybe more dovish and realistic. And I'll also note we haven't seen this come up with RFK Jr. yet since he joined the Trump team. But I remember watching him on the All In podcast, last year, and I have an article here in, from June, that his policy, in contrast to the Republicans and Democrats, he's just like, he wants to ratchet down the temperature and the arguments with China and figure out a way to have a more, open and focused and friendly discourse. Let's find areas, of agreement, and they're not like, no one's super enthusiastic about like having another war, fighting over Taiwan. Big question there. As I see it, America has its problems, and this administration want to focus on those problems. But China has real problems. For all the greatness we see them in dominating the EV industry, there's lots of homegrown problems in China. Neither country kind of really wants to be antagonistic to each other. So like the grand bargain, I agree with you, there's a grand bargain out of pure self-interest, right? Like for the next 5 to 10 years, America, sort out your problems, China, sort out your problems, and we're the two superpowers. Like, let's figure out how to kind of further collaborate rather than, but carefully, trust but verify. Like, we want to integrate, but we also need to decouple. We can't just like outsource all of our supply chains, and COVID showed that we're overly reliant. So we can carefully distance, but at the same time, collaborate. And I think CATL, BYD, the Made in China 2025, they want to be seen as global powers. Like the Mag 7 in America, China wants to have their Mag 7, right, be global, and CATL and BYD and others are like that. So I'm in agreement that there's a grand bargain potential here, and I would just love to tease out more of your thoughts in that article and anything else that you're hearing to support that case.
Yeah. So, I'm so glad that you did the work to, to flesh all of that out, so the audience can hear what we're talking about. I've lived through two situations that you could say are analogous to this when I was doing the reporting for that article, and since I just came from a conference in Las Vegas, and again talking about the potential for a grand bargain. It's very hard for people to get their arms around this. They can't get their minds around that the atmosphere could change completely, and this could happen. But I can tell you, in case you were probably focusing on this too. In the 1980s, Reagan's whole team was anti-Soviet hawks. They were Cold Warriors. When he went to Reykjavik and broke bread with Gorbachev, they were aghast. And suddenly we're pals. And so that's one case. And the other one, in the 70s, I was just a kid, but I remember when Nixon went to China and ping pong diplomacy and the exchange of bears and all of that, and so I've seen this before. I also think, for all the reasons you stated, that you start out talking really tough, but you know but in the end, uh, I think Trump is exactly the guy. This is something Biden wouldn't be able to do because he's a Democrat, right? Trump could do this because he wouldn't be pilloried as a weakling, and so these are the reasons and the ones I want to incorporate what what you said, because it's so smart, that that's why it looks like a gang fight with chains and knives, but that's the atmospherics, and it just seems obvious to me that this is where we're leading. Where I wanted to go is, if we seem both to accept this. What does that look like, though? I wonder. I'm worried less about BYD coming, even though BYD, you know, it is a very tough competition, and however, we've been in this position before with the Japanese. Ford and GM and Stellantis are going to have to step up to the plate. But what about CATL? We saw Northvolt collapse. Northvolt never figured out how to make a battery, and these were not some kind of next gen batteries, just ordinary NMC against graphite. They just they spent $15 billion. They never learned how to make batteries. And I just wonder, we get CATL here. Are we, you mentioned, we don't want to give away the whole supply chain. We want to have our own champions. What do you think? Are we going to end up, CATL comes, it's making LFP. Are we going to end up, are we going to develop our own champion?
Tesla has a 4680 battery, and hopefully that's going to succeed. BYD's great success. We just interviewed Michael Dunn, which will actually come out before this interview, Steve. And he talked about how they have very significant, that they were a battery company and now they're making cars. But they've also invested in mines and cathode, and so their vertical integration has been key to their success. And Tesla is vertically integrated, right? And they're making their own cathode and battery and lithium hydroxide, and have other plans, I think, for some other metals. But Stellantis just signed a 50-50 joint venture with CATL to build a battery plant in Spain. So a startup, it sucks, big time sucks that, Northvolt couldn't figure it out using conventional technology. But SK Innovation, LG, Samsung, Panasonic, there are other battery manufacturers with bigger balance sheets, long-term commitment, that are making batteries successful. So maybe the startup battery champion for Europe, it's not going to work. It didn't work. But that doesn't mean I think CATL Stellantis in Spain is a model for what we do here in America. I don't think Michael Dunn said the same thing. It's very obvious. Just take the same playbook China used with 50-50 joint ventures, with the auto companies into China for, 20, 30 years, and do that here. So they can't just be a licensing agreement like Ford, CATL, because Ford probably won't be able to figure it out directly, and you won't get as much of the know-how, from China. So, but if let's learn from them. We learn from them, then we can build an ecosystem of better battery manufacturing, and CATL will compete with SK and Samsung and LG and Tesla, on the battery side, and that's fine. I question, I mean, there has been some legislation that said, like, if it's a BYD car, if it's a Chinese car, and then you're driving a Chinese car and the data is going to China, that's a worry. That's a national security worry. That could be like a non-tariff barrier. How do we get around that concept? I don't know. If BYD has a 49% joint venture, they're selling their cars here, but the data doesn't go to China. The American 51% owner needs to kind of control the data. Maybe that's a way to get around it. I'm not sure. But I think this is likely. I think another person on the dovish side, I would say, is Elon Musk, right? Who has a very big business in China and has Trump's ear on a lot of topics. He clearly hasn't been pushing, the EV. And in fact, he's been like, yeah, let's get rid of the EV subsidy. But that's also, it could be his self-interest because he's better placed than his competitors to make money, from it. But I do think it was on the tape today that Trump invited Xi to his inauguration, right? That's like unprecedented. There's no, and he hasn't said yes, but if he did that, that's like a huge olive branch, right? It shows that he's open for, to negotiate. And he's a tough negotiator. And the Chinese it's a Sun Tzu, Art of War. It's a very formidable competitor, but it's different than under Russia times. These were nuclear powers, and it was, Russia was a basket case of an economy. China is not a basket case. But there's a lot of this precedent. The Japanese came to America and helped us get better in the auto industry. The Koreans came. Yes, they were allies. China's less of an ally, but I think there's scope. But as importantly as that is that I want to see Ganfeng. I want to see, the cathode makers. When we spoke to Michael Dunn, I asked him, and he basically said that the Chinese are 25 to 30% lower cost of production for EVs. I said, okay, out of that 25 to 30%, how much of that is subsidies versus how much is, environmental, lax environmental, or human right, whatever, slave labor, or, vertical integration. And he said about 50% was subsidies. He didn't really answer on the environmental and the labor, but he did emphasize the vertical integration, closed loop system as being critically important. And on that score, that's logical. That's Tesla's model. So if Trump wants to, does Trump want to compete on EVs, or does he want to cede this industry to China, right? So should America just, slowly, we'll do ICE, we'll do maybe hybrids a little bit, but are we? What do you think? Because welcoming China will get us there a lot faster.
Yeah. I mean, just picking out a few things from what you said. One is the China playbook. Tesla received $2.5 billion over the last, from 2019 till 2022, $2.5 billion in subsidies from the Chinese to operate in China.
Yeah.
Tesla also received $9 billion, has received $9 billion in subsidies in the United States from the various pots of money. So it's rich, when Musk says, cut everything off, because he's on the other shore already, right? He's crossed, the torrential river. The others haven't. And so that's kind of self-interested there. The other thing is, the Chinese, yes, they invited American and German, Western companies over. They subsidized. The foreign companies were eligible for the subsidies, but they also favorited BYD and CATL. If you wanted to make cars or batteries in China, if you wanted to make electric vehicles, especially, you had to use CATL batteries. And so if Mike Dunn is saying, let's just copy the China playbook, then we would invite them in, but we would favorite an American battery company. Does Tesla become the equivalent in that kind of scenario? Is it the equivalent of BYD? It's vertically integrated. It makes batteries. It makes cars. So those are interesting. The other thing, the China playbook, we still have. It's really important to note that the China of today is not the China of 10 years ago. These companies, they're subsidized. Ours are too, by the way, but they know what they're doing. CATL is the best battery maker, the most innovative battery maker on the planet. They do have Chinese companies do have low cost labor and the captive supply chain, but they're also very good and efficient at making cars, and the same with the batteries, and so
and the cathode and the chemicals,
yeah,
on the nickel side, on the lithium side, on every side. They've just been spending 20 years doing this, and that's what I'm saying. To catch up, we'll catch up a lot faster if we can leverage their know-how across in every segment.
Yeah, I just mean that it's very important for your audience to recognize we're not dealing with children. We're not dealing with pampered children. They're pampered, okay, but there's brutal competition there too. Terrible cutthroat competition among these companies that they go through before they get where they are now, so we invite them in. We invite the Chinese in. They're producing here. We need them. We learn from them, but everyone needs to keep in mind, we got to step up to the plate. The exercise is getting our act together, and I kind of think we will. Do you have any doubts in that realm?
This is MAGA, right? This is manufacturing in America for a very key industry. It's chemicals. This is working. These are good jobs. And Biden built a lot of the infrastructure downstream. Battery helped, subsidize, as JB Straubel said at the Benchmark conference. You get what you incentivize, and they incentivize too much of battery and car, and not enough cathode, electrolyte, and and chemicals. So if we just tweak that a little bit, so we can get more of the upstream. But we need skills. We have too many people in America that go to Wall Street or go to to social media companies and figure out how to get us to click on advertisements, and not enough smart people to do the hard sciences of making batteries. And so we definitely need, and I would hope that Trump would promote this type of activity. But I think America can catch up. America is blessed, more so than many other countries and locations, to do this and compete with China. So I think it's in our interest. This is one sector where China is in the lead. We should just acknowledge that. And it was based on various policies in America. And some of this was like an anti-mining, not in my backyard policies. I'd also say, like, on the solar side is another industry. To go back, actually, so I think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible. Some of the other cabinet picks you mentioned, like the Department of Energy and the Department of Interior, like Doug Burgum at Interior, and then he's heading the National Energy Council and the Department of Energy, Chris Wright. But these guys are entrepreneurs. Like if we'll put up a slide here, how many billionaires are in his cabinet, but they're not just billionaires, they're entrepreneurial billionaires. They've created a lot of jobs. They understand, there's common sense. And this Chris Wright, who is a fracking pioneer, he's also on the boards of solar companies and geothermal companies. Right? I also saw something like the Department of Energy secretary is usually an academic or a politician, and he's like the first time that it's like a business guy. So yes, he's going to support fossil fuel. Yes, natural gas is likely to be used a lot to support AI data centers, but on the ESS side, solar plus wind plus batteries. Chris Wright, I think, gets that. Doug Burgum, yes, he comes from North Dakota, but these guys are sensible. They're going to see we can compete in a lot of these industries, and with Vivek Ramaswamy and David Sachs and Elon Musk, common sense is going to prevail. And and Trump tweeted, just if you invest $1 billion in America, we'll speed permitting for you. I don't know if he was referencing directly mining. He might be referencing building solar farms and the like. But I think it was very significantly mining related. I think his deregulation agenda, lower taxes, which is going to be the main focus of the administration from the get-go, because his tax cuts from 2017 are expiring this year. So I believe there's common sense, a lot of smart people there, and they see electric cars, are the future, right? We might need PHEVs and these extended range EVs for a period of time, and BYD, 60% of BYD's sales are now these extended range, EVs. But if we could figure out how to get $20,000, $25,000 cars in a world where inflation for everything has just been going up, to suddenly have super cheap cars that are better with long range and with all, as you said in your article, with all the tech and the gizmos that are in, they're much better cars. They're better, faster, and they're not yet cheaper, but they're going to get cheaper if we learn from the Chinese.
Yeah, yeah. Now where we have to go, Howard, now is to acknowledge that this is the future, but it's also the present. The Chinese are already here. So Volvo.
How are they here? Talk about the companies that are, where there's a start. I think there's Goshen or Geely. What are some of those companies that are already in the States?
Yeah. So Goshen is having some trouble, but they're pioneering. They're trying to tough through. So Goshen attempted to set up an LFP cathode making plant in Illinois. No, in Michigan, and then an assembly plant of those cathodes into packs in Illinois, and they totally screwed up their PR in Michigan. They did the whole deal in secret. They made the town boards, the members of the town board, sign NDAs, and then they sprung the resulting agreement on the public. Now, what do you think the public thought? So they literally recalled every member of both town boards. None of those people who voted for this in secret are still holding office. And basically, the cathode making deal in Michigan is dead. The one in Illinois is not. That they're just refurbishing a Kmart, a closed down Kmart. But so that that may push through. Geely owns Volvo. It has owned Volvo since 2010. So Volvo in South Carolina is making electric cars, and there's another Geely company, Polestar, that's also a sister company to Volvo. It's also in South Carolina. It's making its electric cars there. I write earlier this year about Tinci Materials. This is a pioneering maker of electrolytes, an ingredient, LiPF6, which is the core ingredient in electrolyte, and they pioneered how to make this stuff, really cheaply they're setting up a factory in outside Houston. Why? Because they're going to supply Tesla. They're Tesla's main supplier. But when they did that, because they're coming in with their with their method of making the LiPF6, they have brought down the global price of LiPF6. Like, it's a fraction of the price. So this has challenged American LiPF6 makers like Huntsman, for example. And just one more. So again, I mentioned that I'm coming from a conference, the AABC battery conference in Las Vegas. This is the first conference in all these years that I've been to, industry conference, where Chinese companies were presenting. So these are Chinese companies in the supply chain, like making coatings. How do you make the electrodes better? How do you make dry electrodes? How do you make electrolyte that'll work with solid state? These are all companies that were there and eager to speak. And so again, when I'm talking to colleagues and other observers of the industry about what you and I are forecasting, they can they cannot envision that this happens, but it's happening. There are some here, right? The first, the pilgrims, have landed, and more are coming. More are coming by sea, and yeah.
That's a great comment. I was actually on LinkedIn this morning. I saw a post from Kurt Kelty, who's ex Tesla, I think, and now he's at GM.
He spoke
And
there.
he
Yeah.
spoke there, yeah. And he's like, "What an amazing week it's been at the AABC conference. I've been fortunate to attend for more than 2 decades. I can say this year was truly electrifying. Watching our battery industry grow and mature into what it is today. I had the privilege of sharing GM's vision for an all-electric future, including our strategy to drive down battery costs while maximizing performance through our new technology roadmap. Our recently announced joint development agreement with LG Energy Solution on prismatic battery cells is just one example of this commitment." So, like, GM is all in electric, right? For all the talk of, waning interest, this year, and they lowering battery costs. They signed a very substantial deal with Lithium Americas. Also, they have a deal with Northvolt and graphite. They have a deal with MP Materials. So let's talk a little bit about the sourcing policy of the three autos we were referencing 3 years ago when we were here. Is the environment of the SPACs and the IPOs, and if you look, lithium's down a lot, but Fisker, Nikola, Canoe, Arrival, like all these names that went public, even Freyr, no longer a battery company, it's a solar company. Hyliion, not a lot of these companies have survived. That's American capitalism. Northvolt didn't survive, but I think there's a lot of failures in China as well that we don't hear about. But
Yeah, that's for sure.
So yeah, what do you think about like the big three? Like Stellantis has been on the tape with a lot of investing in a lithium sulfur company in addition to this joint venture with CATL. So it's not going away. And the last thing before I'll let you answer is, EVs in America is like a big political issue, like a Republican Democrat thing, right? But now with Elon Musk, if you're a Republican, it's okay to drive an electric vehicle. You can't, So I think you're going to have a lot less of this fear, uncertainty, and down this negativity toward electric vehicles that's been part of the discourse, out there. You're not seeing a lot of anti-EV messaging anymore since the election's been over.
Yeah, definitely. I've tried to track this, and I'm sure there's data out there, but you can imagine that the wellspring of Tesla demand shifts somewhat from California to red states, right? Because for the very reason you stated. I mean, Elon is a hero to MAGA, and it will be, maybe it already is, popular to buy and own a Tesla. Yeah, so I do see that GM, even before the IRA, was for whatever reason attempting to source locally and source outside China, right? So its main partners are in South Korea. It's tried to establish sourcing in Canada, in the United States. You mentioned Lithium Americas. I think the first thing John Evans should do, if he hasn't already, is go out and see Chris Wright, and they could talk like brothers. I mean, what is fracking but entrepreneurship, right? A new kind of drilling. They totally revolutionized the oil industry. Isn't that what John is trying to do out there in Nevada? And I'm sure that they have a lot of common sensibilities, which is pretty much what you were saying, right? They're all talking the same language.
I think you're right about that. I think the people who are speaking to him even more are like the Arkansas oil people.
Yeah,
for the
excellent.
snack over.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah. That, I mean, I hope Exxon does crack DLE in the smack over. But I've also seen, Exxon has a history of going for these kinds of non-oil things. Like for example, in the last run in the aughts, like 2008, 2009, 2010. No. What was it? It was like 2011, 2012. They got into algae fuel, fuel like oil made from algae. Well, they don't talk about that anymore, right? I mean, that was a big thing.
I remember
So
Bush was talking about switchgrass. Was that was a long time ago? Was
yeah,
that okay?
yeah, but no. This is I remember because I talked with them when I was at a think tank in like 2012, 2013. So that's the time period. In any case, yeah. So we need these. Our supply chain did kind of fall away. The things we talked about in our last podcast 3 years ago, it's useful to return to that. It looked like, all systems go. 2021 looked like all systems go. We had all of these SPACs, all of these promising companies. A lot of them have fallen away. You mentioned Kurt. Kurt was asked from the audience, what does he think? What went wrong with Northvolt? What would he have done differently? And he said, one big thing, that Northvolt thought it could do everything by itself. GM took on LG as its partner. GM understood it didn't know how to make batteries. Ford did the same thing with SK, and now you're mentioning Stellantis and CATL. I think, like, if we're spinning forward, we got to be humble. We got to be humble, but we also have to be. It's kind of a paradox here. We need to be bold too. For all of that, Halicon days, of 2020 and 2021, of all those SPACs, we still didn't get very many companies. There were some, right, that made a big splash, but we need dozens, of entrepreneurs to pop up, like the same number of entrepreneurs who pop up in Silicon Valley to make some kind of app that's that uses Chat GPT as its basis. we need that same number to make up our supply chain. And the currently the incentives for doing that are there. Uh, we need to change our mindset more around getting into manufacturing, into industry.
Agree with the latter point. I'm not so sure. The startups have happened and they're not like being successful, but the big balance sheet companies who are kind of getting better, like LG and SK, Posco, Samsung, they really ratcheted up their entry. That they decided, a few years ago that we need to be in this industry, and they LG, I guess, had some problems with the Ultium cells with GM, but they're sorting and figuring that out. And even in China, a lot of the companies, there's too much overcapacity. There's got to be some consolidation. So the CATL, the BYD, actually, when we were speaking with Michael Dunn, a lot of the successful Chinese EV makers are new companies like this Li Auto and Neo and Xpeng, which happen to be listed in the US. Those companies are actually doing okay. They have 15, 20 billion market cap companies. Startup, EV companies have market caps not that far from, Ford and GM. But I think we need to welcome and we need to learn. I think there's going to be more bankruptcies. So some of the legacy automakers are just not going to make it, right? And I think where you do see the entrepreneurship is you definitely see it on the mining side. A lot of people are starting, trying to start new mines. So there's a lot of John Evans of the world, on the lithium equity scoreboard, and similarly in graphite and nickel and elsewhere. Do you see? There hasn't been a lot of like real promotion of mining. You hear him talk about, Trump talk about deregulation and permitting, but he's not really said we need more critical minerals manufacturing or mining and processing in America, and in friendly countries, right? So that Biden did say that to some degree, but not on the mining side. He wanted a friendshore, but I'd really love to see a mining friendly kind of commentary out of the administration.
Yeah, I would too. It's true. It's true that he has not mentioned mining, and you would think that that would be right in his wheelhouse, right? I mean, that's since he's so well. He does. He mentions coal mining, but not
He
not
hasn't really mentioned coal mining too much this election cycle. Last time, like Trump digs coal, that was not part of the conversation this time around.
right, right, right. Now you mentioned, and I'm wondering, like, do you so LG and Samsung, these folks have been making batteries forever. I mean, they're experts in making batteries. SK is relatively new in this area, but when GM came out with the Volt, the plug-in hybrid in 2012, LG made that battery. And so yeah, so but are you saying that we ought to embrace the South Koreans as uh American, right? They're
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah, I
think
think so too.
I think the Japanese and the Korean, they're so far ahead. And look, Tesla's trying with the 4680. Go for it, right? If Google or Amazon or others want to get into the battery business, that's great. But Northvolt shows that it's really freaking hard to compete with the Chinese. Let's just, there is an argument there. Should we, is LFP one level, and should we leapfrog and focus on solid state like QuantumScape is doing, and some other players? That there is, we'll see if that happens. But I think, like as Elon Musk says, existing technology is efficient enough, and the more you do it, I mean, Bloomberg NEF, just showed again, battery costs are way down, and just like solar panels, PV panels, existing technology, if it's Wright's law or Moore's law, that I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I think the technology's there, and I think America is very friendly with Japan and Korea. This whole Nippon U.S. Steel argument notwithstanding.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, I don't know why we're opposed to that. But yeah, just riffing off what you've just said, if we are mimicking the China playbook, and we're going to invite the Chinese in, but we're going to favorite American champions. It could be continues. Tesla partnered with Panasonic. So the Nevada Gigafactory, Panasonic makes the cells. All Tesla does is load those into packs, and so it's learning how to make cells now with the 4680. It has not made them at large scale. So we all presume, since we know that Tesla is pretty cool, that they'll be able to do that. But you could see that champion could be a Tesla Panasonic partnership, or it could be an LG partnership with someone.
It's all of the. I think it's all of the above. We're already partnering with Japan and Korea.
Yeah.
And every other country, is welcoming China. Like Europe's welcoming China. So we just need the grand bargain. We need to welcome China, have them in the mix, and let's compete. But let's partner and compete. And across the supply chain. Look, Ganfeng wanted to build Thacker Pass, right? That's a fact. But the Biden administration said no, like we can't have Chinese, in here, so then they forced Lithium Americas to separate into two separate companies.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you had a different mentality, you said, oh, okay, they're now about to embark upon the most ambitious project ever attempted in the lithium industry, right? 0 to 40,000 tons in something that's never been done before, using, Fluor as their main contractor. But imagine if Ganfeng was, a 49% partner in that project. Do you think the probability of success would be increased with the cost of cap? I don't know if the cost of capital it would have been hard to subsidize it with a DOE loan, right? But there are ways to finesse this, right? Like Tesla got subsidies, as you said, in China. Why can't some Chinese companies get subsidies? Especially like the manufacturing tax credits. You haven't mentioned those. I think you think that they will stay, like the 45X.
Yes, I do.
We're getting a little bit long here. I just want to talk about two other things, and that is, autonomy, right? Tesla, a major reason for the rise in Tesla's stock price since the election is because he's not so much focused on making more cars necessarily, but regulation toward autonomy. And then I think your most recent article is about like AI. AI is very much the future, and data centers as a demand driver. I mean, fundamentally, we care about what's going to be the demand for the raw materials. And, if AI and data centers, means more solar plus batteries, instead of nuclear, or natural gas, or in addition to that's a demand surprise. And if autonomy takes off sooner than we expect, that could also be a positive demand shock coming from the U.S. So if you could comment on both of those, and then we could wrap it up.
Yeah. So starting with data centers, AI and data centers. So so we're talking about the context here is next gen battery chemistry. So we're talking silicon anodes, and we're talking sodium ion batteries. And so the car industry's uptake, their intended uptake of these next gen chemistries, the timeline has been extended further out. So no longer 25, 26, 27, but more like, okay, we'll start taking your stuff 27, 28, 29, and the amounts that will go of that silicon that will go into the anodes will be less than we said at first, and we'll gradually incorporate it. So that means that for silicon anode developers, their valley of death, the prototypical valley of death, that long period between when you've made your product and when you commercialize it, and you need a long runway of cash to survive that valley of death has lengthened. So what could tide them over? And so I spent some time over the last couple of weeks with silicon anode makers, and they have made deals, and more deals are coming with the developers of data centers, because of the capacity for silicon to charge fast. It's just lithium ions can move through silicon much faster than they can through graphite, and so these millisecond of bursts of power that are required during the operation of data centers in the learning, when AI is in its learning mode, and then when it's in its reset mode, they need like these milliseconds, and then they also need like a 1 second, 2 second, 1 minute, 2 minute, and these are perfect for silicon. So they're finding customers there, and then sodium natron energy, which uses Prussian blue is their cathode and their anode, and they have found customers in the data center base, and it also has to do with the fundamentals of what sodium ion can do. So there is, these companies stand a chance to survive because of that. And then what was the second question? Oh, it was about autonomy. So I'm kind of skeptical about full autonomy. The timeline for that. I'm skeptical about robotaxis. One of the things that all of these stories say as the rationale for robotaxis is that there'll be massive demand to take autonomous taxis versus taxis or Ubers that have humans in them. And one of the things that is said is that you get into an Uber and they smell, and there's a nasty driver. I have never been in a smelly Uber ever, and I've never also had a nasty driver. These are the friendliest people on the earth, and they're totally clean cars. And usually there's a bottle of water, and they'll have a wire you can plug. You can charge up your phone. They have mints in the car. You can freshen your breath, and so like that's false. And I mean, do we hate humans? That is the premise: is that we hate our race, so we don't want to be with another person in that car, another human. And I just think that that's false. And however, I do think that ADAS, right, hands off, eyes off, like level, heavy level 3, level 4 driving on the freeway. What is true? What's true is that the soulless hour and a half or two that people spend on the freeway, bumper to bumper traffic, going to work and coming back from work, day after day, month after month, year after year, soul killing, right? And so if you could have an ADAS, eyes off, hands off, and you can kind of hang out in your car while it's taking you to work, that's a real, there's a use case for that. And these cars are likely to be. This is happening. Mercedes already has one of these. GM has a hands-off model, but it's eyes on Super Cruise. I think we will go to eyes off, and these cars will mainly be electric cars.
Okay, excellent. We're going to dive deeper into this autonomy thing in future episodes. I'm not like super well versed in it. I just see if you get cheaper cars and it's a big question actually. If you did have all these robo taxis, do you need to produce so many cars in America? You could produce far fewer cars if people are, not buying as many because they're going to outsource. I don't need a car because
Wait,
95% of the
okay,
time it's in the driveway,
okay.
right?
Stop right there. Stop right there. Howard, are you just talk about you? Are you gonna not buy a car if there are robo taxis?
Yeah, I'm not relevant. The question is, my son going to not buy a car? And he might not buy a car. I live in New York, so he doesn't really need
But
a car. But
right, New Yorkers, New
but
Yorkers won't.
yeah, I mean, if you're far away from places, and like I don't know, but I do know that younger generations are more adaptive to technology than. So I shouldn't just use my brain in analyzing this question.
Okay.
I need to think younger.
Well, let's bring your son on next time.
I'll talk to him. I have a 15-year-old son and a 20-year-old son, and the 15-year-old is just like, okay, I want to beat the 20-year-old to actually getting the driver's license because the 20-year-old doesn't have a driver's license. Okay, that's a cute cat you have there. I'm a dog
Hello,
person myself. What's your cat's name?
Luna.
Luna, really? Okay. So have you thought of a song for this video?
Well, you made me think of the Doors, but I was, like I like L.A. Woman a lot, but I don't know if is that a title that fits these days? I don't
I
know.
don't
What's
know.
your favorite song?
How about When the Music's Over or
When the
The
music.
End?
All right, let's go. Dower. Yeah, yeah.
Light My Fire.
Light My Fire is good.
Uh, okay, I'll look at.
Break on through. Break on through.
Break on through. That's a good one. Okay, break on through. I don't think we've. The only time I've ever used the Doors were in prior bear markets where I did kind of like Riders on the Storm. So break on through I haven't used. Let's use that. Break on through to the other side. Great, Steve. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, it won't be another 3 years before we could have you on again. And yeah, it was a great discussion and to be continued. Policy is evolving, and January, 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks, is the inauguration, and buckle up.
Yeah, yeah. What I was going to say is let's keep talking because I was being honest. I'm finding very few people with whom I can have a what I think is a realistic discussion on these geopolitical questions. It's like there's not a lot of intellectual nimbleness. So let's keep talking.
There's a lot of people that I've spoken to in Washington who are like taking the other side of this argument on the grand bargain. They're saying like, no, China's an adversary and we need to like push them away. And I think this is somewhat contrarian what we're talking about here. But yeah, no, we'll continue the dialogue. I have a few more contacts in DC, and like everything in lithium and this battery supply chain, it was niche, then it got hot for like 2 years. It's niche again, but it's a big industry, and Tesla carries, like, as niche as we are, Tesla's a big kahuna, and AI and ESS is something very important to watch, not just EVs.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, I think that those guys are the contrarians and not us.
The contrarians who are anti-China?
One who you're saying that you said we're kind of contrarian compared with the people you're talking to, and I think they are the contrarians. That what we're saying makes a lot more sense. Yeah,
it's counter to the current policy. Like the last 10 years has been adversarial with China. We're advocating for a change in the tone.
Yeah,
and
that's it. That's right.
and that's a bit contrarian, and hopefully we're going to be right. All right,
Okay.
thanks a lot, Steve.
All right.
Talk soon.
Talk soon. Fun. It was fun.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Cheers.